we must be able to move troops and supplies within the WES. This opens the door for additional follow-on forces from the Marine Corps and the larger Joint Force to mobilize and respond.
All right, y'all, welcome back to the Common Arms channel. Okay, today we're checking out a video from the Marines YouTube channel. Now, I don't check out too much from the Marines YouTube channel, but I guess that's because a lot of it's kind of familiar already. But this one is pretty interesting. So this is talking about the future of the Fleet Marine Force. Now, when people refer to the Fleet Marine Force or the fleet, that's basically the operational side of the Marine Corps. So more of the amphibious aspect and those sort of combat arms elements that are supporting pretty much the Marine Corps efforts. So, of course, you have air, you have infantry, you have all the support personnel as well. And part of the Fleet Marine Force as well, of course, is going to be the Navy component, or even just, again, in general, the amphibious component. Now, I'll say, while I was in, didn't necessarily feel like it, but the Marine Corps modernizes very, very quickly. At least in the last decade, the Marine Corps has been modernizing very well as far as like the equipment, kind of what they're focusing on, at least for the infantry side of things. Having been in the Army infantry as well, you do get nice things, of course, but as far as like the actual modernization as to, you know, why you're getting nice things, it's not necessarily as targeted, as focused as the Marine Corps. So the Marine Corps is pretty dedicated on shifting things to a certain direction. That's kind of why they got rid of the tanks and everything. So yeah, I think this would be interesting to kind of see how the future of the Marine Corps is going to look. And again, we've kind of seen a few changes here and there, but for the most part, they've kind of stuck to it. So yeah, let's go ahead and check this one out. It should be good.
The MEU, enabled by amphibious ships, remains the crown jewel of our naval expeditionary forces.
A lot of ribbons.
No
Jeez.
naval vessel in our inventory is capable of supporting a more diverse set of missions than the amphibious warship.
Ooh,
The
okay.
Marine Corps began, and continues to be, an expeditionary force, thoroughly tied to the Navy.
The things that I'm picking up on. Man, okay, so this looks cool. Like, they call it manning the rails. It looks cool. But I know when we did it, when we were pulling into New York for like the kind of Fleet Week Veterans Day thing, we were there for like 3 hours standing like this. The sailors didn't really care that much. They were kind of just like moving around, even some of the Marines. But I was trying to like generally stay at parade rest because we were still kind of in view of like the land. But yeah, that was definitely a struggle. It also would have been cool to be a part of like one of these big photo ops. I don't know how often they do this, bringing all like the ships together and kind of having them in like a formation, but it always looks super cool.
An expeditionary force, thoroughly tied to the Navy, on land and at sea.
Oh yeah. Oh, LPD?
Throughout its history, Marines have prevailed as America's 911 force, responding to global crisis, assisting the Joint Force.
Kind of look like my footage for a second. This always looks cool until you're actually on the inside, and then it goes off of the ramp and then drops into the water, and it feels like, you know, it's just not going to go back up.
Force, responding to global crisis, assisting the Joint Force and the whole of government, and deploying to conflicts in every climate and place.
Nice, dude.
Naval forces from amphibious warfare ships have deployed globally in support of peacekeeping missions, evacuated U.S. embassies, and provided humanitarian assistance to those in need.
Oh, yeah.
They were there when troops were needed to engage Saddam Hussein's forces from the sea in the Gulf War.
Oh yeah, I'm sure they're excited
Later
about that
sent
too.
to the hills of Afghanistan after 9/11, and yet again went ashore to engage ISIS.
Yeah, they were like, I think they were like burning through all of their arty barrels because they were firing so many rounds at ISIS from like Syria. Yeah, they were putting in a lot of work, that artillery.
Most recently, they were the first on the ground to support evacuation efforts in Kabul.
Yes, sir. It was the anniversary of that pretty
naval
recently.
Forces on ships are often the first on the scene, the first to provide aid and comfort, the first to contain a brewing crisis, and when asked to do so, the first to fight.
Oh yeah, it's in the hymn.
As our nation expects, the Marine Corps, when partnered with the Navy, is uniquely capable of expeditionary and amphibious operations.
Hell yeah, dude. It's such a cool working relationship.
Through our forward posture and consistent presence, we provide the Joint Force and our allies the ability to stand in and persist inside an adversary's weapons engagement zone, seize and defend in key maritime terrain, including sea lines of communication, and immediately respond to global crisis.
It's also cool seeing the allied nation ships with ours And they're
we
cooler
must
amphibious
retain
vehicles.
no less than 31 amphibious warfare ships to meet requirements stated in national defense strategies spanning multiple administrations. Until 2010, the amphibious ready groups and Marine
Nice.
expeditionary units maintained the ability to provide the Joint Force Commander with 3 ARG-MUs globally 365 days a year.
Yeah, and generally speaking, they'll go kind of like hand in hand. I'm not exactly sure what the nuanced term is, but like this would be an amphibious ready group. But as far as like the MU is kind of in that amphibious ready group. So the MU is kind of like a rotational force. So the MU is always existing. There's always a few different MU elements, like 22nd, 24th MU, things like that. And then you'll have the infantry battalions that'll basically cycle through these MU rotations. And then, the MUs, they generally are part of these amphibious ready groups, and they'll go out and they'll deploy to certain areas as a kind of like a crisis response. And it's a really, really cool mission. I was never on a MU exactly. We've been on ship and stuff, but it wasn't actually part of a MU. But I got to say, it's a cool mission. And, it's kind of hard to fight the complacency sometimes of being on a MU and, kind of just chilling on ship. And then you actually need to respond to something. It's an interesting mission for sure.
Analytical studies from 2008 to 2022 show that with current maintenance readiness, 31 amphibs are required to keep 2 ARG-MUs forward throughout the year, each made up of 3 amphibious warships. Today, if directed, contingency plans indicate that we will be required to deploy 5 ARG-MUs in a condensed time frame in times of conflict.
5?
In addition, ships must be available
sense.
for training to ensure the proficiency we need to meet our mission essential task.
The size of our amphibious fleet has diminished over the years.
Badass.
UCOM no longer receives a MU 365 days a year for a 24/7 active crisis response. If the inventory supported it, would you benefit from having a MU that was enabled by both tactical aviation and Group 5 UAS that's capable of reconnaissance and counter-reconnaissance?
Nice question.
It would be on station 365 days a year.
Take me
I
a
would,
while to respond
Congressman,
to
but
that.
as you well know, as a commander, you never get everything that you want, but certainly those capabilities
Jeez.
are.
Again, these oh my gosh, these ribbon racks. They are 4-star generals, so they've been in for like ever. But holy cow, he's literally done everything.
Precious for effective deterrence.
The 30-year shipbuilding plan,
Okay.
when combined with decommissioning plans, sees a drastic decline in amphibious warfare ships from 31 in 2022
Damn.
to 28 in fiscal year 2025, and then to 24 in fiscal year 2037. Concurrently, historic naval fleet readiness
cool.
levels are 46%, compared to the planned 80%. And extended maintenance
Yeah, that's always
cycles
the
are
case.
averaging 12 plus months, vice 8, further reducing availability of global maritime mobility.
Yeah, I gotta say, even when like just in general, the military and the Marine Corps, especially the Marine Corps infantry, we were always kind of short on people. Honestly, in the Army, it felt like we were short on more people, but that's because there's there's more units. It's kind of harder to fill all those units. But yeah, there was always like when you're talking about like this is the readiness that we're supposed to be at. And I don't know exactly how they're using, like what metrics they're using for this specifically, if it's just manpower. That's understandable, but if they're using like other things like medical readiness or stuff, that's going to be kind of muddied waters. But yeah, as far as personnel, you're always kind of missing certain people in the unit.
Maritime mobility within an adversary's reach is crucial to our success. Operating inside this zone will enable Marines to hold key terrain while our larger amphibious ships secure critical sea lines of
Badass.
communication. We must be able to move troops and supplies within the WES. This opens the door for additional follow-on forces from the Marine Corps and the larger Joint Force to mobilize and respond.
Damn.
Distributed maritime operations, such as expeditionary advanced space operations, demands the ability to maneuver to and within
the HIMARS,
global
nice.
littorals. A key planning factor remains operating without ports or runways. To
That's
achieve this,
impressive.
we require 35 medium landing ships produced by the Navy's Light Amphibious Warship Program, in addition to our traditional amphibious warfare ships. These light amphibious warships are smaller than our recognizable ships, but larger than our current ship-to-shore connectors, such as the Amphibious Combat Vehicle, landing craft utility, or
Yeah,
the
I was about to
landing
say.
craft air cushion.
Landing craft utility, I don't know if we've seen that. This was kind of more of an Army thing from what I saw. I mean, I never saw these in the Marine Corps specifically, but yeah, the LCACs was kind of like what we had the most, kind of what we're seeing here. And yeah, as far as like their ability to move certain equipments to the shore, you know, it was able to take vehicles and whatnot, so a couple vehicles at a time even. But yeah, as far as like maybe longer distances or just moving a lot of sort of ground vehicles, yeah, it's kind of limited in that regard. But I think, I mean, it was pretty solid capability. It really depends on kind of what you're trying to use those ships for, at least where you're trying to move them from, like where's point A and where's point B. But at least in terms of deploying like amphibious ground troops, the LCACs were, you know, pretty helpful in moving that
The
equipment.
landing craft air cushion. The 35 requirement stems from a minimum of 9 LSMs being required to support one Marine regiment. Our
One
standing
regiment?
forces require maritime mobility for 3
Okay.
regiments. To ensure 27 ships are available for these forces at
That's
any
a
given
lot.
time, we must account for 8 additional ships due to routine maintenance cycles.
Okay.
And it
Makes sense.
appears that in Indo-PACOM, those intra-theater connectors are going to allow us to operate in that contested space. Things like the Army watercraft, the Navy next generation connector ship, the Marine
Man, they're
Corps
moving.
light amphibious warship.
What's going
All
on
those
here?
things are incredibly important. If you were to believe Admiral Aquilino and Admiral Davidson, which I do, they have stated that the risk is now and that intra-theater connectors are incredibly important to bridge the tyranny of distance, to be
Okay.
able to operate effectively in the Indo-PACOM. In your estimate,
Yeah, that does make a lot of sense when you're talking about the Indo-Pacific region because, I mean, it's pretty broad. There's a lot of sort of like small island chains. There's a lot of smaller countries in general. And again, they're all kind of just surrounded by water. So you're talking about the Philippines, Indonesia, Japan, Korea, all this area, having the ability to kind of deploy more equipment through the sea, especially if it's, you know, relatively uncontested, then that does make a lot of sense, especially since some areas might not necessarily have landing strips. And even if a landing strip does get damaged or what have you, you do have that capability as well.
sit today as we speak with intra-theater logistics connectors, as I spoke of, and how essential are these programs in allowing logistics to flow?
This is a critical question. Intra-theater movement is very important, especially the distances we're talking about in the Pacific, and the fact that we will be under multi-domain attack, essentially, when we do this.
Ultimately,
Sure.
the LSM will allow Marines to rapidly and efficiently move throughout the battle space to sense and make sense of the adversary's actions and provide valuable intelligence to commanders. They are critical to modernizing our legacy pre-positioning
That is a
capability
lot of
into a
equipment.
dynamic,
Holy
integrated,
shit.
afloat and ashore network that is ideal for intra-theater, small-scale distribution and sustainment, and will complement the
90,000
actions
gallons
of
of
the larger
fuel.
naval and joint force. However, LSM fielding does not start
Sheesh.
until 2029. Until then, a bridging solution is
Damn.
required. Some examples
That's
in
far
use
out,
include
man.
the expeditionary fast transport and contracted commercial vessels, which can provide a basic level of mobility. The
Okay.
expeditionary fast transport is an aluminum catamaran based off a commercial design. It is helping to
looks so
temporarily
odd.
bridge the gap between airlift and sea lift through its ability to transport Marines and their equipment to austere, shallow draft, and degraded ports.
Okay, at first it looked like something that you'd see like kind of like World War II. They just like made it really quickly out of necessity. Again, they're talking about here how it can kind of bridge that gap, which, yeah, I guess it can. I don't know its capabilities or, I mean, really what the limitations are. Doesn't look like it can really have any sort of defense to it necessarily, so it's probably going to have to tie up a few other ships to pull some more security for it. But I imagine the other one's kind of going to be like that as well.
The Marine Corps Warfighting Lab, working with Military Sea Lift Command, has contracted to charter a commercial stern landing vessel. This vessel will be used to test the shore-to-shore, beach-able concepts associated with expeditionary advanced base operations where the expeditionary fast transport cannot be used. The lessons learned using the stern landing vessel will be valuable in developing the final requirements for the LSM.
Is this some of the stuff we've heard about, 2nd Marine Division potentially working in cooperation with the 6th Fleet to do ASW operations, sensing operations? Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
All of that is ongoing in all domains, and the guidance as we embrace cold response, it's an exercise that's proceeding as we speak, is to get all of us to stretch our left and right buoys, and you can't succeed if you just occupy one.
Left and right buoys. We see left and right lateral limits a lot, and that's kind of like a range term or like a marksmanship qualification range term. But that one seems a little bit more applicable, at least more of like a Navy/amphibious term.
One domain and attempt to achieve effects in one domain. So the Marines are doing a fantastic job of leading from the front and showing the rest of us how to do it right, especially in the brown water environment.
So you, as the combatant commander, see a lot
Well
of
said.
promise in these experimental efforts.
Absolutely.
While we peer into the past for inspiration and continue to
Oh,
experiment,
snap.
we must also look to leveraging what our allies and partners have to offer, including commercial vessels and littoral staging platforms as a way to enhance our littoral maneuver capabilities today. Going forward, the naval force must advocate for a larger Department of the Navy budget. This will enable congressionally authorized multi-ship buys, provide cost savings through industrial-based stability,
cool.
and improve current maintenance and readiness cycles.
The amphib ships that you refer to, so are not nice to have. They're essential. If we're going to achieve the objectives of the
have.
national security strategy, the national defense strategy, the national military strategy, we need those 31 ships plus the light amphibious warships. They're not nice to have. They're essential.
Oh,
They're essential
man,
to
he's
deter
telling them,
campaign
dude.
forward. They're essential to be able to respond to a crisis. They're essential in a warfight.
Our maritime mobility is critically
sure.
important now and will be even more so in the future.
Oh my gosh, all the options. Nice, dude. Okay. Oh, okay. That outro was like unnecessarily dope. Okay, so this gave us a really good understanding of kind of where they're trying to push the Fleet Marine Force as far as that's amphibious capability and that's ability to deploy combat power using naval forces and sort of naval platforms. Again, right now, of course, we have a lot of amphibious ships. They're trying to move, to the point, I think, where they said they're trying to get 31. Again, amphibious ships just offer a capability that you can't replace with anything else. Of course, when you're talking about, maybe dropping paratroopers, that relies on, and kind of like they mentioned in this video, there's going to be a multi-domain war going on. So while some domains are going to be contested, you need to be able to deploy combat power using the other domains. So if the air is contested, you could at least try and deploy forces using the sea. And having these amphibious vessels allows you to do that, whether it be, taking ospreys from the ship, taking it to the shore, or again, deploying, the AAVs, deploying the LCACs to take this equipment from the ship to the shore, which is absolutely going to be crucial. There's going to be a lot of other things you need to consider, especially the defenses that are going to be established by these countries in, again, mostly the Indo-Pacific region. So that's going to require lots of kind of advancements and innovation when it comes to the tactics as well, and also how you're using this equipment, because you can't necessarily always take stuff from the ship to the shore without it being uncontested or without you kind of facing obstacles along the way. So there's a lot of other things to consider, but the basic necessity, the basic need for having these amphibious forces and platforms is always going to be there. So it's important for them to forecast what it needs to look like, especially when you're talking about a peer-to-peer conflict. You need to be able to have that capability to deploy forces in a bunch of different areas, because again, you're not going to concentrate everybody, put all your, what's the term? Forgot the term, but like all your stuff in a bucket, all your stuff in the same place, basically. Yeah, so it was kind of interesting. I was kind of looking a little bit more for like the modernization of the actual infantry ground forces, but again, then it could and should be talking about like the modernization for the actual air forces, which we're kind of seeing as well, as far as like the F-35 Bravo, I think is the naval variant. So that's kind of covered. But again, we're talking about like aircraft carriers and other things. There's a lot going into it. So I think this did a good job of staying on topic and kind of just briefing that. And I do like how they also had like I think it was Congress just talking with like the chief of staff, or I'm not sure if they're all chief of staff, but yeah, it is kind of nice to have those as well, because those are the spokesmen, those are the stakeholders, I guess, for you know, the preparation, the readiness for these ground forces, amphibious forces, air forces, all that stuff. So yeah, I think it's important to add that as well. Let me know what you guys think. Of course, if you guys are in the Marine Corps or were in the Marine Corps, let me know how this seems to you. Like, are we doing enough? Do you think that we're actually going to be able to get the supports to be able to modernize and beef up these amphibious forces? Or do you think there should be more of a focus somewhere else? I mean, of course, if you guys are in the Navy, I think you can kind of chime in pretty well for that. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. I think this video did a good job of kind of covering it. Again, staying on topic, providing some kind of real-time information as far as the discussions that are actually being had. And of course, like the advancements that they're working on. So yeah, solid video overall. Let me know what you guys think. That is it for this video. I'll see you all in the next one.